So I'll tell you what design thinking is and how it is different from product thinking. But before I do that, I think we should understand that both product thinking and design thinking are two methods which have intertwined goals, right? Which is why it gets confusing sometimes, like what do you mean by product thinking and what do you mean by design thinking, right? So with product thinking, it will help you define, what are the drivers, what is your competitive landscape, what is the actual problem that the user is facing. And by using product thinking, the kind of questions that you can answer, right, are very different from design thinking, right? So when you're asking questions in product thinking, you're asking what is the problem, right? Why solve this problem? Like, why as a business I should solve this problem? What is the job at hand? What is that the user wants to do, right? What is the strategy, right? How will I implement this particular product feature, right? What will be my positioning for it in the market? What are my goals, like, or some people might use called SMART goals, right? Which are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound, right? So what are your SMART goals? What is your timeline? How do you plan to do it? How long will you take to deliver a product like that, right? And again, in turn, what are the sub features which will be required to build the whole product, right? So these are the type of questions that you will be answering when you are in product thinking, right? And the bottom line is that with product thinking, you'll identify the problem and its impact on the organization when you solve it, right? And once you're done with this thinking process, what you do is you go into design thinking, right? So that's a very clear difference between what product thinking is and what design thinking is. So what happens is once you're done with this product thinking piece of it, right? And you have defined all these questions that we just discussed, right? You move into design thinking, and that is where you bring in your user, right? So what you're going to do is now is like look at their user needs, look at their behaviors, look at how do they react to situations, what are their emotions at different parts or inflection points during the journey, right? How can you increase adoption of a feature? These are the kind of things that you will solve in design thinking. So if I have to define it, I think a very popular definition is like it's a non-linear iterative process that teams use to understand users, challenge assumptions, and then redefine problems, right, to create solutions. And and usually the kind of solutions that design thinking solves are called wicked problems, right? Right. In design, we call it wicked problems because these are like ill-informed problems. You don't know why this thing is happening, right? You'll never know. And what design thinking will let you do is like basically uncover what the actual problem is and then solve it, right? So in design thinking, essentially, we have 5 phases, right? The first phase is empathizing with your user. This is basically you reaching out to your users, having a conversation with them, doing surveys, doing user research, noting down what are the problems, how are they solving it currently in their lives, right? Try to understand that, take inspiration from their own lives, try to understand where does your user sit, right? What type of environment are they comfortable with? What type of language are they comfortable with? Understanding all these things, imbibing yourself with your user's persona and creating and finalizing that persona, right? And then you define problems. So a major difference which is clear here between product and design thinking is basically that product thinking will look at the problem as a whole, right? And design thinking will take tightly scoped things in the middle of it and then improve on them, solve them, right? So once you are done with the empathizing part, you define the problem. Now you're ideating solutions over it, right? What can be the solution for this? Like we discussed in the design sprint thing, which is there, right? So in design sprints, what you do is basically have people come together and you know um, give ideas as to like what can be the problem and how it can be solved, right? So you collect all those inspirations and then you start identifying or ideating what can be the solution that is there, right? And once you are done with that ideation phase, you take the ideations, you take your sketches and then basically take it ahead, prototype it, and now you have a testable thing which you can take to your users and test it with them, right? So I think that is where design thinking falls. And as a product manager, what you can do is like once you have defined your product's goal, right, you can like sort of sit in these design thinking sessions and ensure that both the users' expectations and the business goals are at par with each other and are getting fulfilled, right? Which will in turn give you a better running product.